Hello, this is episode 57 of the Tomato Timer, and we have Ludo joining us today. Ludo is a third
Hello.
year international politics student at the University of Stirling. He's the founder and president of Global Justice Stirling. He's also the secretary of the University of Stirling's volleyball club. He's interested in politics, journalism, social, and environmental justice. So good to have you, Ludo. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
I want to kick off first thing with global justice. Now, it's a very big theme. Firstly, tell me what it means to you. What does global justice mean to you?
So, yeah, Global Justice started out of a group of friends, like most of the time happens with these
Mm,
activist groups. And it was really the need for a group of people that really felt strong values such as social justice, environmental justice, and that
mhm,
really just wanted to get together in Stirling and change what needed to be changed and try to improve different things, I guess. So our slogan is think global but act local. So I guess with the
mhm.
global idea, trying to implement stuff here in Stirling, where we're all studying at the moment.
And how does your studies feed into this? So you're studying international politics. What are you learning, and what kind of perspectives are you gaining from your kind of university studies that feed into the kind of the work that you do through your society?
Yeah, well, obviously, so I'm a international politics student. So
Hmm.
obviously, with Global Justice Stirling, which is environmental, social, and economical group that fights for environmental and social justice. We try to achieve different kind of things, and we try to campaign for different issues. I think that the uni is helping me on the theoretical side of that, trying
Yeah.
to understand politics better. Obviously, it's a very complex field. There are so many overlappings from other fields as well, so there is so much to learn. And obviously, being on the loop with current affairs is not always easy. So this is kind of also why we created Global Justice, to discuss and share and kind of teach each other and learn from each other politics, I guess, which is, at the end of the day, I think politics is our everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something we're not taught at school, and many of us live our whole life going through the system, and yet we don't know about how our politics, or even of our, forget about national, but even local kind of government, kind of city level politics works, and yet we're in it every single day. Now, activism work, and people who are in this space often kind of like, maybe that's a little bit of a generalization, but they're often like driven to do some, task, some campaign, some objective. What do you think? Why do you think studying is important for you to strengthen your activism work? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that studying is very important in the sense that you always need to remind yourself why you're doing that in the first place.
Mm,
Obviously, it needs to be sparked by some sort of strong ideal or values. In this instance, we're not even talking about ideologies in that sense. For example, for the instance of the environment, it's a
yeah.
very much fact based, fact check issue. So I think that anyone from the political spectrum can really care about the environment and really call themselves environmental activists. Whereas for other issues, I think that is a different situation. For my example, for my instance, I tend to with our group, we tend to focus on a lot of range of issues, and we try to focus on the intersectionality of these issues. So
Mm,
we believe that they're all interlinked, interconnected, and that there is one common theme. And basically, throughout fighting all these issues and trying to do something on a local level as well as on a national and global level on these particular issues. We're trying to look at the big picture, though, which I think is a really important thing, and which leads us also to why we try to implement the Stirling Climate Festival in the first place. The main goal of the festival was really to try and highlight the intersectionality of the environmental movement and how all different kind of other issues that are affecting our societies today come and play a role into that, such as racism, inequality, or so many other issues.
Yeah. I love the word that you mentioned, and I had an opportunity to speak about it at a quite higher level forum as well, which is intersectionality. And I'd love for you to kind of give me a little bit of an explanation to some of the listeners who may not have heard it before.
Yeah, so intersectionality actually quite interestingly, we were thinking with Global Justice Stirling to have an educational next semester about it, because I think it's quite a complex concept and quite a new concept as well that has become quite commonly used now. So basically, my take is intersectionality is the interconnectedness in the different struggles, and it kind of sets its core is really to show that each struggle, each issue kind of sets itself on top of the other. It doesn't replace each other. So I would say that it's not a matter of I've been discriminated because of racism, I've been discriminated because of climate change, because I'm a climate refugee, let's say. We are different for that. No. I think that intersectionality is kind of points out at the fact that we're both being oppressed, and therefore we both we both share the same issues. It's just from a different perspective. I think that's
Well, allow me to share a little bit of a mathematical description of it, because if any of you have kind of done Venn diagrams, you'll imagine, intersections are always those kind of where sets have common elements in it. And it's a really interesting concept because, exactly as you said, we have so many social struggles at this moment of time, social but also environmental. Then we need to consider that humans and plants and animals, they're all in this kind of struggle together. And it is this. Oftentimes, our struggles are accentuated because of the different intersections we live within. So, as a great example, racism and climate change and climate refugees. But what about those who are facing racism and they're climate refugees, and now they're in an intersection, and they're facing both problems, and suddenly some of the problems become so much more difficult. We talk about income inequality, and the challenges that that come with it. But if you add things like racism to that, or you add kind of gender inequality to that, it suddenly becomes more and more difficult. In the world that we live in, you're absolutely right. We're so interconnected. Our problems are no longer siloed. We cannot look at one individually. We need to be considering it in a more holistic fashion. I think just the fact that we describe the world as a global village, right? We are connected to each other all the time. We see each other's perspectives. We see each other's backgrounds and values and morals, and they're so critical in how the world is going to be shaped in the future. I would have loved to hear a little bit more about, and hopefully it is something that you may be able to implement through your society, because I think intersectionality is something we should be really discussing much more. That was my aside. I want to get into a little bit more about the festival that you set up. Now, tell me a little bit more about the festival, and then have another question for you as well.
Yeah, sure. The Stirling Climate Festival, again, was born out of a group of friends. Really, it was a good friend of mine that really started the whole thing and kind of got traction with the whole festival and kind of brought us all in. It really wasn't my thing. Lewis basically brought up this idea, and it was like, I really feel like there is need here in Stirling to kind of highlight the climate emergency, especially thinking about COP being 2 weeks after we actually thought about that and put it the week of the 11th from the 17th of October, because it was like 2 weeks prior to COP26. And we thought that it was very important, Scotland being, the host of this very important panel. We thought that it was so important to actually bring attention back to it. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic really brought the attention away from the climate emergency, fairly so. but at the end of the day, the pandemic will go away. There is a vaccine for the pandemic. There isn't a vaccine for the climate emergency. So that was kind of like the first idea that kind of sparked the festival. Then obviously a lot of months of organization brought it together. And the general idea was try to offer as many events. We had around 40 events.
Wow.
From completely different organization, a lot of societies from the university, but many NGOs and charities, mainly from Scotland or the UK, and try to bring together completely different fields and show the different perspective of the climate emergency, basically from yoga sessions to planting trees to film screenings to art exhibitions. It was really, we really tried to show every side of it, to show the intersectionality that there is in the climate movement. And I think that was another thing that really shocked me at COP. See how many different people came together and see the marches separated in all the little sections that basically represented huge parts of the world, huge issues around the world, huge movements in itself that came to voice their support to do something, to tackle this emergency that clearly affects everyone equally. I mean, that's actually incorrect, but that
Affects everyone
affects
equally.
us all. Exactly.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the results you saw, because so many of these events have been bringing awareness. Did that awareness turn into action that societies or people within the attendees of the events take on next?
So our main goal was exactly to mobilize, especially pupils and everyone. It wasn't really targeted to students only, but and so our aim was to bring to action. The reality is that it's always very hard when you do this kind of work in the humanitarian, work in activism. It's very hard to see the progress and the achievements. This is why I think they call it a struggle as well, because it's not something you can quantify. The person you've inspired is probably not going to come up to you and tell you directly. So I think that it's hard, but I think that there was a very good support in the Stirling community, at least. And hopefully we're looking to do a second edition, and our aim would be for it to become a real tradition here in Stirling that is brought on by its citizens, by its council, by the students, and it's really like part of the community, and it just becomes a tradition that on the long term will very much raise awareness in Stirling as well as in Scotland and in the UK, and maybe inspire other small towns like ours to inspire younger climate activists.
Absolutely. And I want to take us to COP now. I had the the pleasure to attend a couple of the days near the end of it, and I had an interesting experience. But I wanted to hear what your experiences were like. What part of the COP did you attend, and what did you get out of it?
So I attended the weekend where we had the marches. So it was the Fridays for Future March, and then the Climate Day of Action on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday as well. So us with Global Justice Stirling, we went all the 3 days, and my experience was very positive, in the sense that I hadn't been at such a big rally, at such a big march with so many people ever, not that big ever, and it was incredible experience for me to see that there is actually so many people out there that want this to change, really want to tackle this emergency. I met people from Belgium, from Spain, from the Netherlands, from Italy. It was great to see some people from Italy that had arrived from my own country, that had arrived in the morning with the bus and, had come all the way up just for this. so yeah, it felt very, very emotional and very empowering. Obviously, on the other side, COP itself was quite a flop, quite a failure. But notwithstanding that, I think that the marches and the people and the civil society outside the actual conference was the real COP, and I think that was shown to the world.
I had a similar experience. I was taking the train up, and it was I think it was a Sunday morning, and I just sat down, and everyone around me was going to COP, and you just had these conversations with the Mexican delegates and these delegates, and I was like, wow. Actually met someone who was going to be who's part of Fridays for Futures, and she was talking about her work and how she was going to be at the march, and you kind of I can completely like feel and resonate with that emotional side of things. It was everyone was there, and everyone was for the first time. I think, especially because the pandemic had kind of siloed us away for so long. We were finally like making a community out of it. And we were with only a few words of introduction. We were talking about the most deepest and most important conversations because that's what meant most to us. Because we were thinking this is our future. Um, so I completely see that, and that I think that sense of community is something that will remain. We can have events that come and go, but if you have people who've bonded together over a mission or certain values, they will remain for much, much longer. Did you have a chance to read up or find out what sort of the kind of the results of the COP were in terms of the legislations passed or the kind of bills passed, and did it reflect what you hope to get out of it?
So the second, I'll respond to the second question
Sure.
first, which is it definitely did not. It did not stand up to our expectation, not even close. So yeah, I did read up. Obviously, to say that I actually read the whole results would be untrue. But what came out of it, I think, was obviously a good commitment on the side of all the countries to actually tackle this emergency. Actually, I think worth considering is something that the director of the organization we're part with, the Global Justice Stirling, which is Global Justice Now. The director Nick Dearden was talking about this and saying that, it's a huge step forward compared to COP21, in the sense that the climate movement managed to put this on the agenda and put it at the top of the agenda. Obviously, the huge weather catastrophe that has been happening helped with that as well, to make global leaders aware of the situation we're in. But I think that activism and the civil society was a big part of it. And we brought it to the agenda, and now we're talking about it, and we're talking about it seriously. But the commitment falls short and of a lot. I think that the fact that there wasn't a commitment on keeping fossil fuels in the ground was a big failure. Although countries like Denmark and Costa Rica tried to form this alliance, this symbolic alliance called BOGA, that was supposed to be beyond oil and gas, but no one signed up. Italy signed up as a friendly partnership country, which basically means that we support it friendly, but we don't actually commit to it. So generally, I think there is still a lack of political will from the global leaders, and I think that partly it's due to few inconsistencies within the UN climate panels itself. The fact that there were more delegates from corporations than from countries. The largest delegation was actually made of lobbyists from corporations, some of them exactly fossil fuels. When you are talking about erasing and phasing out fossil fuels, it does sound quite ridiculous. And I think the global leaders are aware of that. So yeah, it's just time that the people have clearly understood the threat. It's time that they understand the threat too. And I mean, I think they understand it. I think it's time they take
Absolutely.
action on that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And my experience, I also was not there for very long, but I had the opportunity to go and sit in a panel discussion led by some indigenous populations, specifically those from kind of parts of Alaska, as well as those from the island of Palau, which is a Pacific island. And they talked about how so the island of Palau will be one of the first places in the world to be affected by climate change in the sense that it will go underwater with the rising sea levels. And Alaska is a place where, due to kind of the polar amplifications, where where Antarctica and Arctics actually get double the amount of kind of heat or temperature change just because they're at the poles of the Earth, and how their way of life was being destroyed, and they just could not move forward. But they also reminded us of something which I wonder whether you have any thoughts about that. These people, these kind of communities and societies have lived in symbiosis and in kind of synergy with nature for so many years, hundreds, thousands of years, and they have their own way of a lifestyle which actually is very, very, it's a give and take relationship. And I remember one thing that one of the attendees said, which was that for them, the concept of a gift was never just a receiving thing. Whenever you received a gift, it was always meant to be kind of given back, and it didn't have to be equal in terms of materialistic value. It was just about that if I gave you a gift, Ludo, tomorrow, I don't expect you to give me a gift, or anything like that in the near future, but maybe 10 years later, you're going to give me something back. It doesn't have to be the same value, but it'll be something of an exchange. And they do the same with nature. If they take something from nature, they give back. And I think we've forgotten that part, especially as we grew further and further away from nature. There's the fact that we've lost so much of the kind of traditional and kind of indigenous knowledge about plants and our ecosystem, but also the fact that if we're taking from something, we have to give back. I felt that was a very poignant and very kind of moving moment to hear from the people who were, from in the next few years, their homes would be lost if we did not do something about it. And they weren't fighting for like anything but preserving their lifestyle. They weren't saying, "Oh, give us more money" or anything. They were saying, just "Don't let us suffer. Why are we suffering?" I don't know whether you had any conversations like that, or whether you think had any thought about kind of the indigenous populations or the people who lived closest to nature.
Yeah, I think that is another very interesting thing of this COP in Glasgow. I think that the indigenous people, not as much as they should have, but were part of the conversation, at least, which weren't previously in the previous COPs. And I think it's very important because, as you said, these communities are the ones that are at the front lines of the climate emergency. And furthermore, they are the least that have caused any of this. So the 1%, the people that cause all of this, are the ones farthest away from the actual consequences of this emergency. And the people on the front lines that are actually seeing the impact now of the climate breakdown are the ones that actually never did anything wrong, or their impact is absolutely null compared to the Western countries in the world. So yeah, I just feel a strong sense of frustration and anger. And there were a lot of speeches after the marches from indigenous people, and they were all super inspiring, and most of them actually just made me sad, because I think that anyone hearing these people talk understands it's like it's a human reaction. You cannot not feel empathy and put yourself in their shoes if you were exactly in the same place, because at the end of the day, we're talking about luck. It's just geographical luck, whether you were born there. I could have been born on an island that is now at the front line of the climate emergency. And I would like people to listen to me. I would like people on the other side of the world that are not yet impacted by it as much as I am to take it seriously, and thinking that anyway it's going to come and affect us all sooner or later. I don't understand why we're not tackling it now. But yeah, we actually organized a protest together with the Free West Papua campaign, and they are indigenous indigenous-led liberation movement that is trying to basically get independence from Indonesia, and their idea for a new independent state would be what they call a green vision, which basically is exactly what you were saying at the start. Having a mutual beneficial relationship with nature that doesn't exploit the land and its resources, but that has something of a give and take relationship. And I think that is beautiful, and I mean that at the end is the real definition of sustainability, which is a word that we throw around a lot these days, but that at the end almost always ends up being empty rhetoric.
You're absolutely right. Ludo, it's been so good to have you, but we've reached the end of our episode. I think we've asked and understood a lot from your piece. Definitely going to look into more about intersectionality. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much.